Jake Thompson is a young police officer, only 28 years old, but he has nearly 5 years of experience working at the local police department. Every day he wakes up at 6 a.m. when the sunlight has yet to filter through the trees outside his window. After quickly having breakfast and putting on his uniform, Jake drives to the police station, where he knows that each shift could bring unforeseen challenges. Jake's job is not just about patrolling and handling incidents. He often faces tense situations, from violent altercations between gangs to serious traffic accidents. Each time he receives an emergency call, his heart races, and he knows he must be ready for anything. During night shifts, when the city is shrouded in darkness, Jake often feels lonely and anxious. The pressure from his superiors is also significant. They constantly demand that he and his colleagues meet quotas and handle every situation quickly and effectively. The tense meetings with higher-ups make him feel as if he is being monitored every minute, every second. In a recent shift, Jake had to deal with a major brawl between two gangs. When he and his colleagues arrived at the scene, the chaos was overwhelming. The sounds of shouting, ambulance sirens, and police alarms filled the air. Jake felt the weight of pressure on his shoulders, but he knew he had to remain calm. He intervened, separating the participants and trying to de-escalate the situation. After everything settled down, Jake felt exhausted and drained, but inside he held a small sense of pride for having fulfilled his duty. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Marcus Johnson was tirelessly working to improve the lives of those around him. As a community activist, Marcus dedicates most of his time to programs that help children and the underprivileged. He is a tall man with a warm smile and eyes full of enthusiasm. Marcus believes that every child deserves a chance to succeed, and he has spent many years building educational and sports programs for children in the neighborhood. Every afternoon, Marcus organizes sports activities for children at the local park. He is not just a coach, he is a friend, a big brother that the kids can trust. Marcus often tells them, "Nothing is impossible if you try your best." His words have inspired many children, helping them overcome the challenges in their lives. Marcus not only assists children, but also connects with their parents, organizing meetings to discuss ways to improve life in the community. The relationship between Jake and Emily, his girlfriend, is also facing challenges. Emily is a journalist, and she often writes about social issues, including racism and inequality in the community. Their conversations often revolve around these sensitive topics, and sometimes they escalate into heated debates. Jake feels the pressure from his job, and at times he struggles to understand what Emily is trying to convey. She frequently criticizes how the police handle incidents, and Jake feels hurt by those criticisms. "Jake, I just want you to understand that not everyone sees the police the way you do. Many people feel scared when they see a police car," Emily said during a recent conversation. Jake felt uncomfortable, but he also knew that Emily had a point. "You can't just look at one side of the issue. I'm just a person trying to do the right thing," he replied, trying to defend his perspective. The tension between them escalated when Emily decided to participate in a protest against racism. Jake felt anxious for her safety, but at the same time he understood that Emily was fighting for what she believed in. "You can't get involved in these things without my support," she said, her eyes determined. Jake felt as if he was standing between two worlds, one being the responsibility of a police officer and the other being love and support for those who are oppressed. The daily lives of Jake, Marcus, and Emily are all affected by complex social issues. They each have their own ideals and goals, but they also face challenges and pressures from society. While Jake tries to fulfill his responsibilities as a police officer, Marcus strives to create positive change in the community, and Emily fights to elevate the voices of the oppressed. Each of them is searching for their own path, but those paths intersect in a world filled with contradictions and injustices. The first chapter closes with the image of Jake, Marcus, and Emily, each carrying their own dreams and worries, yet all looking toward a brighter future for their community. Jake Thompson was sitting in his patrol car, his eyes glued to the computer screen on the dashboard. The light from the screen illuminated his face, highlighting the tension and anxiety etched on it. It was nearly 1 p.m., and Jake was waiting for the next call. He knew that in his line of work, peace was only temporary. At any moment, everything could change in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the alarm rang, startling Jake. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. "All units, we have an emergency call about a large brawl at Central Park. There are multiple participants and there may be weapons involved. Requesting all units to respond to the scene immediately." Jake's heart raced. He quickly pressed the radio button to confirm, Unit 23 en route. As Jake drove to the scene, a whirlwind of thoughts raced through his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension. This brawl could be one of the most dangerous situations he had ever faced. He recalled the lessons from training, the simulated scenarios he had participated in, but reality was always different from theory. The feeling of anxiety welled up inside him, but Jake knew he had to stay calm. He couldn't let fear take over. Upon arriving, the scene before him was staggering. Central Park, usually a peaceful space for families and children, had turned into a battlefield. The sounds of shouting, cursing, and the clash of bodies echoed everywhere. A group of people was fighting, while others stood around cheering and egging them on. Jake could see some individuals wielding objects that could easily become weapons, and a shiver ran down his spine. "All right, everyone, stay calm," Jake shouted as he and his colleagues stepped out of the car. He tried to create an atmosphere of control, but the surrounding noise nearly drowned out his words. He signaled to his team, instructing them to split into two groups, one to approach from the left and the other from the right. Jake knew they needed to separate the participants before the situation escalated further. As Jake moved closer, he recognized one of the fighters as Marcus Johnson, someone he had met at community events. Marcus was trying to intervene, but the others were not listening. Jake felt a sense of discomfort rising within him. He had heard many things about Marcus from his colleagues, who often labeled him as a troublemaker, an untrustworthy individual. These prejudices left Jake feeling conflicted. Was Marcus really the cause of this incident? "Marcus!" Jake called out, trying to get his attention. "Step back! Let us handle this!" But Marcus didn't seem to hear, or perhaps he didn't want to listen. Jake felt anger and frustration boiling inside him. Why did Marcus have to intervene in a situation like this? Didn't he understand that his actions were only making things worse? As Jake got closer, he saw Marcus trying to pull someone out of the crowd. The person appeared to be drunk and was shouting, but Marcus wasn't giving up. He was trying to remain calm, speaking to the individual gently. "Hey man, just calm down. We don't need to do this," Marcus said, his tone patient. But the others continued to ignore him. They kept fighting, and the situation grew increasingly tense. Jake felt a surge of anger rising within him. He couldn't let Marcus keep intervening. "Marcus, back off!" Jake shouted, but Marcus still didn't listen. Finally, Jake decided he had to take action. He plunged into the crowd, trying to separate the participants. "Everyone, stop right now. This is the police," he yelled, but the surrounding noise made his words nearly inaudible. After a long struggle, the police managed to gain control of the situation. The participants in the brawl were separated, and some were arrested. Jake let out a sigh of relief, but inside he still had many questions. Why was Marcus here? Was he really the cause of this incident? Or was he just someone trying to do the right thing in a chaotic situation? As things calmed down, Jake approached Marcus, who was sitting on the ground, panting heavily. "Thanks for trying to intervene," Jake said, although he still felt a lot of doubt in his mind. Marcus looked up, his eyes filled with determination. "I just wanted to help. I didn't want to see anyone get hurt," he replied. Jake felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had misjudged Marcus, and that made him feel ashamed. "I'm sorry," Jake said, his tone sincere. "I didn't think you were just trying to help." Marcus nodded, but his gaze remained skeptical. "I understand, but remember, not everyone is like that. We need to work together to change that." The emergency call had ended, but the questions and prejudices remained. Jake knew he needed to change his perspective on Marcus and people like him. They were all trying to do the right thing in a world filled with contradictions and injustices, and perhaps, only by working together, could they create real change in their community. Marcus Johnson stood on the side of the road, his hands cuffed behind his back, a sense of injustice and anger swelling within him. He couldn't believe he was being arrested just for trying to intervene in a brawl that he was not responsible for. The police officers, whom he had once thought of as protectors of the community, now viewed him as a troublemaker. The feeling of betrayal and misunderstanding made him feel as if he was being pushed into a dark corner of society that he had worked so hard to change. As the police car drove him away from the scene, Marcus looked out the window, seeing the onlookers standing by, their eyes filled with curiosity and concern. They didn't know that he only wanted to help, that he wasn't the bad guy they thought he was. Why can't people understand, Marcus wondered. Why do they only see what they want to see? These thoughts kept repeating in his mind, like a sad song that never stopped playing. Meanwhile, Jake Thompson sat in his patrol car, feelings of guilt and torment flooding his mind. The image of Marcus, someone he had met at community events, being handcuffed and taken away, made him unable to stop thinking about his decision. Did I do the right thing, Jake wondered? Did I misjudge Marcus? He recalled the prejudices his colleagues had expressed about Marcus, the criticisms he had heard. But now, seeing Marcus arrested, Jake felt as if he had been deceived by those biases. "Do you see, that's why we can't trust people like him?" one of Jake's colleagues said, breaking his train of thought. Jake looked over, feeling anger at those words. "You don't understand anything," Jake replied, his tone filled with determination. "Marcus just wanted to help. He's not a bad guy." But Jake's words seemed unable to change his colleagues' minds. They had already formed their prejudices about Marcus, and Jake felt as if he was standing alone in this battle. As the police car arrived at the station, Marcus was taken into a holding cell. The feeling of helplessness made him feel as if he were trapped in a box. He couldn't understand why his efforts to help were being seen as a crime. "I just wanted to stop the violence," Marcus thought, filled with rage. "Why do I have to endure this?" He felt as if society was rejecting him, as if all his efforts to create change were meaningless. Meanwhile, Jake sat in his car, the feeling of torment haunting him. He remembered the moments when Marcus tried to intervene in the brawl, his efforts to remain calm and prevent violence. "Maybe I was wrong," Jake told himself. "Maybe I let my biases influence my decision." The feeling of guilt rose within him, making it hard to breathe. He had once been proud of his job, but now he felt like he had failed. When Jake walked into the police station, he saw his colleagues discussing the incident. They spoke about Marcus as if he were a criminal, an untrustworthy person. Jake felt anger, but at the same time he felt lonely. Why doesn't anyone understand, he wondered. Why can't anyone see Marcus's efforts? These questions kept repeating in his mind like a nightmare that never ended. In the holding cell, Marcus sat alone, enveloped in feelings of loneliness and helplessness. He recalled the children he had helped, their smiles and grateful eyes. "Why do I have to endure this?" he wondered. "Why aren't my efforts recognized?" The feeling of injustice made him feel as if he were being pushed into a world where he didn't belong. As night fell, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat on his bed, thinking about what had happened. The image of Marcus being arrested kept replaying in his mind. "I need to do something," Jake told himself. "I can't let this continue." He decided that he needed to learn more about Marcus, about what he had done for the community, and why he was seen as a troublemaker. The next morning, Jake arrived at the police station earlier than usual. He decided to search for information about Marcus and the activities he had been involved in. He sifted through files, reading reports about the community programs Marcus had organized. What he found shocked him. Marcus was not just a community activist. He had helped hundreds of children, creating opportunities for the underprivileged. Why didn't I know this before? Jake wondered. As Jake continued to investigate, he felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had allowed his biases to influence his decision, and now he felt as if he had betrayed someone who was trying to do the right thing. I need to meet Marcus, Jake told himself. I need to apologize to him and find a way to help. Finally, Jake decided to visit Marcus in the holding cell. When he walked in, Marcus looked up, his eyes filled with suspicion. Why are you here? Marcus asked, his tone cold. Jake felt his heart race. I came to apologize, he said, his voice sincere. I was wrong to judge you. I didn't understand what you had done for the community. Marcus looked at Jake, his gaze still skeptical. Why should I trust you? He asked. Jake felt a surge of guilt rise within him. I know I was wrong, he said, but I want to learn about you, about what you've done. I want to help. This meeting could be the first step for Jake and Marcus to understand each other better, to work together to create change in the community. But first, Jake needed to confront his own biases and find a way to overcome them. The consequences of actions not only affected Marcus but also Jake, and both needed to learn from their mistakes to move forward. A week after Marcus was arrested, Jake Thompson decided to attend a community event that Marcus had organized earlier. The event was taking place at Central Park, where Marcus often held sports and educational activities for children. Jake felt a mix of excitement and apprehension at the thought of seeing Marcus again, but he knew this was an opportunity to better understand the community he served. As Jake arrived at the park, the atmosphere was lively and joyful. Laughter, music blared from loudspeakers, and children ran around, creating a vibrant ambiance. Families gathered around tables filled with food, and volunteers were preparing for various sports activities. Jake felt a warm sensation in his heart as he watched people enjoying their time together. Jake strolled around the park, observing the ongoing activities. A group of children was playing basketball, while another group was engaged in various physical games. Adults were chatting, laughing, and sharing stories. Jake realized that this was not just an entertainment event, it was also an opportunity for people to connect and build relationships within the community. As Jake approached a large table with brochures and information about community programs, he spotted Marcus standing there talking to a group of parents. Marcus looked relaxed and confident, his smile shining like sunlight. Jake felt a moment of hesitation as he approached. He wasn't sure if Marcus would want to talk to him, but he knew this was a chance to start anew. "Hey Marcus," Jake said, trying to keep his tone friendly. Marcus turned around, his expression a bit surprised, but quickly shifting to a smile. "Jake, it's great to see you," Marcus replied, his tone warm and welcoming. "I didn't think you would come." "Actually, I wanted to learn more about what you're doing for the community," Jake said, feeling a bit nervous. "I think I misjudged you before." Marcus nodded, his face showing understanding. "I get it. Many people have biases about me, but I just want to help. I believe every child deserves a chance to succeed." Jake felt a surge of respect rising within him. "I've seen what you're doing here. It's amazing," he said. "I didn't know you were helping so many kids." "Thank you," Marcus replied, his eyes lighting up. "I just want to create a safe space for children where they can learn and grow. I believe that if we invest in the younger generation, they will become great leaders in the future." Their conversation began to deepen. Jake started sharing his experiences in his job, the pressures he faced daily. "Sometimes I feel like I'm caught between two worlds," Jake said. "I want to do the right thing, but I often feel pressured from above and from the biases of my colleagues." Marcus listened intently, nodding in agreement. "I understand that. I faced biases and pressures in my work too. But what's important is that we hold on to our beliefs about what we're doing. If we don't, we won't be able to create change." Jake felt as if a new door had opened before him. He began to realize that Marcus was not just a community activist, he was a person with vision and passion. "I want to help," Jake said, his tone sincere. "I want to get involved in your activities and help the kids in the community." Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with hope. "I'm really glad to hear that. We need more people like you to participate in these activities. Together, we can make a difference." As they continued to talk, Jake felt like he was starting to understand the community he served better. He realized that there were not only biases and pressures, but also wonderful people striving to create change. Marcus was not just a friend, he was a mentor, a guide from whom Jake could learn. The event continued with many exciting activities. Jake joined in a basketball game with the children, and he felt joy fill his heart as he saw the smiles on their faces. He realized that these moments were not just about playing sports. They were about connecting with the community, creating memories, and building relationships. As the sun began to set, Jake and Marcus sat down at a table, enjoying the food that volunteers had prepared. They continued to talk about their dreams and goals. Jake shared the difficulties he faced in his job, while Marcus spoke about the challenges he encountered when organizing community events. "Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting alone," Marcus said, his eyes filled with determination. "But when I see the kids smile, I know that all my efforts are worth it." Jake nodded, feeling a deep sense of empathy. "I feel that way in my job too. Sometimes what we do may not be recognized, but what matters is that we keep trying." Their conversation not only helped Jake understand Marcus better, but also made him realize that they had more in common than he had thought. Both were trying to do the right thing in a world full of challenges and biases. As the event came to a close, Jake felt a sense of hope wash over him. He had found a friend in Marcus, someone he could learn from and work with to create change in the community. They had begun a new journey, one that both hoped would bring good things to those around them. As Jake left the park, he felt as if he had discovered a part of himself that he had never recognized before. He was not just a police officer, he was also a part of the community, and now he was ready to contribute to its growth. After the community event at the park, Jake and Marcus began to meet more frequently. They not only talked about work and challenges, but also participated in various activities together. From sports to volunteer work, their friendship gradually blossomed and deepened. One Sunday morning, Jake decided to join Marcus and some children from the neighborhood for a basketball game. When he arrived at the court, he saw Marcus coaching the kids on how to play. Laughter and the sound of bouncing basketballs filled the air, creating a lively and joyful atmosphere. Jake felt excited as he watched the children run around, giving their all to score points. "Hey Jake, you made it!" Marcus called out, his smile bright. "Today we're going to have an exciting game." "I'm really glad to be here," Jake replied, feeling a warm sensation as he saw the excitement on the kids' faces. He joined the game, and immediately the children pulled him into the action. They played together, laughed, and cheered each other on. Jake felt as if he had found a part of himself that he had never recognized before. Throughout the game, Jake was not just a player. He also took on the role of a mentor. He began to teach the kids some basic techniques, how to pass the ball, and how to score. Marcus stood beside him, occasionally offering advice and encouragement. "Great job, Jake. You're doing really well," Marcus praised, making Jake feel proud. After the game ended, the group sat down at a picnic table to enjoy sandwiches and drinks that Marcus had prepared. The children happily shared stories about their lives, and Jake felt as if he had become part of this family. He looked at Marcus, seeing him laughing and chatting with the kids, and realized that Marcus was not just a friend, he was a leader, an inspiration to the children around him. "Thank you for coming, Jake," Marcus said as they sat together. "I'm really happy to see you connecting with the kids. You have a natural talent for engaging with them." "Thanks, Marcus. I'm really enjoying it too," Jake replied, filled with emotion. "I didn't know I could have such fun moments." As summer approached, Jake and Marcus decided to participate in a volunteer activity at a local community center. They worked together to distribute food to families in need. Seeing the women and children receiving food packages from their hands warmed Jake's heart. He realized that Marcus's efforts extended beyond organizing sports events. He was also working to improve the lives of those around him. During the food distribution, Jake and Marcus had deep conversations about life and the challenges they faced. "I grew up in a tough neighborhood," Marcus shared. "I know what it feels like not to have enough food on the table. That's why I want to help others." Jake listened, feeling a profound sense of empathy. "I can't imagine that," he said. "I grew up in a family with means, but I've also seen the struggles many people face. It makes me want to do more for the community." "We can do so much more together," Marcus said, his eyes filled with determination. "If we work together, we can make a difference." As summer passed, the friendship between Jake and Marcus grew stronger. They were not just friends, they were teammates in the fight for justice and equality in the community. Jake began to change his perception of Marcus and the people in the community. He no longer saw them as strangers but as individuals with stories, dreams, and aspirations. One afternoon, while they were sitting together in a small cafe, Jake decided to share his thoughts. "Marcus, I feel like I've learned so much from you. I used to have biases about this community, but now I see that everyone has value and deserves to be heard." Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's the most important thing, Jake. When we start to listen and understand each other, we can create change. I'm really glad to see you opening up." Jake felt a sense of relief hearing Marcus's words. He knew he had come a long way in his journey, and his friendship with Marcus had helped him become a better person. They had shared joyful moments, faced challenges, and learned valuable lessons together. As autumn approached, Jake and Marcus decided to organize a larger event for the community, where everyone could come together to participate in sports activities, chat, and connect with one another. They planned a sports festival, complete with games, competitions, and other entertainment activities. Jake felt excited at the thought of bringing joy to the people in the community. "We're going to make this event special," Marcus said, his eyes filled with enthusiasm. "I want everyone to feel like they're part of something bigger." Jake nodded, feeling the excitement swell within him. "I'll help you with everything I can. We're going to make this event a memorable experience for everyone." As they prepared for the event together, Jake realized that their friendship had become an important part of his life. Marcus was not just a friend, he was a mentor, someone who had helped Jake see the world in a different light. Their friendship had blossomed, and they had created beautiful memories that both would never forget. As the event approached, Jake felt a sense of anticipation and eagerness. He knew this would be a significant turning point in his life, not only for what they would do for the community, but also for the friendship they had built. The bond between Jake and Marcus was not just a simple relationship, it had become a powerful source of motivation, driving both of them forward toward a brighter future for their community. One Saturday evening, while Jake was on duty, he received an emergency call about a violent incident occurring in a nearby neighborhood. A sense of anxiety and apprehension filled him as he and his colleagues jumped into their patrol car, heading toward the scene. Jake had witnessed many violent incidents in his career, but this time, he felt that something was off. Upon arrival, the scene before him was shocking. A group of young people was fighting, with shouts and loud thuds echoing everywhere. Bystanders stood watching, some trying to intervene while others simply stood frozen, anxious. Jake quickly recognized that one of the participants in the brawl was Marcus, the friend he had grown close to over the past months. "Marcus!" Jake shouted, but the noise around him drowned out his voice. He rushed into the crowd, trying to find a way to intervene. As he got closer, he saw Marcus being attacked by another group of young men. A wave of anger and helplessness surged within Jake. He couldn't believe that his friend was caught up in such a situation. Jake immediately signaled to his colleagues to intervene. "We need to stop this right now," he yelled. But as the other officers approached, they did not simply intervene. They began to use force to control the situation. Jake felt a surge of rage as he watched his colleagues behave inappropriately. They were not just trying to maintain order, they were making the situation worse. "Stop! Stop right now!" Jake shouted, but the chaos around him made it impossible for his words to reach anyone. He felt as if he were standing in the middle of a storm, unsure of how to prevent the violence. Finally, after a chaotic struggle, the police managed to control the situation, but not before several people were injured and Marcus was arrested. As things calmed down, Jake felt an emptiness inside. He watched as Marcus was led away to a police car, his eyes filled with disappointment and pain. "Marcus," Jake called out, but there was nothing he could do to help. A sense of guilt and helplessness overwhelmed him. He couldn't believe this had happened to the friend he had tried so hard to understand and support. After the incident, Jake returned to the police station, his mind still filled with images of the violence. He couldn't stop thinking about Marcus and what had happened. Why had his colleagues acted that way? Why couldn't they see the real person behind Marcus? These questions echoed in his mind, leaving him confused and angry. The next morning, Jake decided to visit Marcus. He knew he needed to talk to him, to understand better what had transpired. As he arrived at the jail, he felt nervous and anxious. He didn't know how Marcus would react to seeing him, but he knew he couldn't abandon his friend in this difficult time. When Jake met Marcus, he saw that he looked tired and sad. "Jake," Marcus said, his voice low, "I can't believe this happened." "Neither can I," Jake replied, a wave of guilt washing over him. "I tried to intervene, but everything happened too fast. I couldn't do anything to help you." "It's not your fault," Marcus said, his eyes filled with empathy, "but I feel disappointed. I tried to do the right thing, but people only see my skin color." Jake felt a surge of emotions rising within him. "I can't believe my colleagues acted like that. They not only failed to understand, but also made the situation worse." "That's the reality we live in," Marcus said, his voice heavy with sadness. "Many people can't see the real me. They only see a person of color in a violent situation." Their conversation continued, and Jake felt like he was beginning to understand more about what Marcus had experienced. He realized that biases and racism affected not only Marcus, but the entire community. "I want to do something," Jake said, his voice filled with determination. "I can't just stand by and watch this happen without taking action." "We need to speak the truth," Marcus replied, his eyes lighting up. "We need to show people that not everyone is as they think." After their meeting, Jake returned home with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he needed to act, not just for Marcus, but for everyone in the community. He began planning a meeting with his colleagues, where he could share his thoughts and feelings about the incident. He wanted to create a space for everyone to discuss biases and how they could change. As Jake prepared for the meeting, he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. He knew this would be a difficult discussion, but he also knew it was necessary. He couldn't let biases and racism continue to affect his community. This crisis had opened a new door for Jake. He was not just a police officer, he was also a friend, a companion in the fight against injustice. His friendship with Marcus had helped him realize that change starts from within. Jake was determined to stand up not only for Marcus, but for everyone in the community, so they could live in a fairer world. A week after the violent incident in the neighborhood, the atmosphere in the community became more tense than ever. Heated discussions took place everywhere, from coffee shops to neighborhood meetings. People felt the need to speak out, and a protest was organized to oppose the racism and violence that the community had endured. Jake received information about this protest from Marcus, and although he felt anxious, he also knew that this was an important event. On the afternoon of the protest, Jake arrived at the location where it was taking place. The air was filled with excitement and determination. Participants, ranging from young people to the elderly, held signs with powerful messages like, "We cannot be silent" and "Justice for Marcus." The chants of the crowd echoed, creating an atmosphere full of strength and hope. Jake felt a rush of emotions as he saw familiar faces in the crowd, including Marcus, who was standing at the front, leading the protest. "Jake, you made it!" Marcus called out, his smile shining amidst the crowd. "I'm so glad to see you here." "I couldn't just stand by and do nothing," Jake replied, feeling a strong connection with those around him. "I want to support you and the community." As the protest began, participants started marching through the streets, chanting slogans and singing protest songs. Jake felt a sense of pride as he witnessed people coming together for a common goal. They were not just fighting for Marcus, but for everyone who had ever been treated unjustly. However, within Jake, a feeling of conflict began to rise. He was a police officer, and his responsibility was to maintain order. Yet at the same time, he felt he needed to stand with the community, the people he had begun to understand and appreciate. As the crowd moved through the streets, Jake sensed the tension in the air. Although everyone had peaceful intentions, he couldn't shake the worry about the potential for violence. The images of the previous violent incident still haunted him. He didn't want to see that happen again, but he also didn't want to hinder those who were fighting for their rights. "Jake, are you okay?" Marcus asked, noticing the concern on his face. "We're doing the right thing." "I know," Jake replied, but the feeling of conflict still lingered. "But I'm also a police officer. I have a responsibility to keep order." "Order doesn't mean oppression," Marcus said, his gaze resolute. "We're fighting for justice. If no one stands up, nothing will ever change." Jake nodded, but the feeling of anxiety remained. He looked around, seeing the protesters chanting their slogans, and he felt the power of their unity. But he also saw other police officers standing on the opposite side of the street, ready to intervene if things escalated. The conflicting feelings between his duty and his support for the community left him feeling confused. As the protest approached a crowded area, Jake felt the atmosphere grow even tenser. Some people began shouting and criticizing the police, while others tried to maintain calm. Jake felt as if he were standing at a crossroads, wanting to support Marcus and the protesters, but also unable to ignore his responsibilities as a police officer. "We need to stay calm," Jake said to Marcus, trying to prevent the situation from worsening. "If we don't, things could get out of hand." "We can't be silent," Marcus replied, his voice filled with determination. "We need to show everyone that we won't accept this injustice." Jake felt a wave of emotions swell within him. He knew Marcus was right, but he also couldn't overlook his duty. This protest was not just an event, it was a fight for justice and equality. He felt as if he were caught between two worlds, unsure of which path to take. As the protest continued, Jake decided to engage in discussions with the protesters. He wanted to understand better what they were feeling and why they felt the need to stand up. "I'm a police officer," he said, "and I want to know what you're going through." A woman in the crowd stepped forward, her eyes filled with emotion. "We're not just fighting for Marcus. We're fighting for everyone who has ever been treated unfairly. We want to be heard. We want to be respected." Jake felt a sense of empathy rising within him. He realized that what they were fighting for was not just for one individual, but for an entire community. "I understand," he said, his voice sincere. "I want to help. I don't want to see this happen anymore." The protest continued, and Jake felt like he was gradually finding his place in all of this. He was not just a police officer, he was also part of the community. He decided that he would not only stand with the police, but also stand with those who were fighting for justice. As the protest came to an end, Jake felt a sense of hope wash over him. He had found a way to reconcile his responsibilities with his support for the community. He knew that this fight would not be easy, but he was ready to stand up and do what was right. His friendship with Marcus had helped him realize that change starts from within, and he would not stop fighting for a fairer world. The protest had been ongoing for a week, and the atmosphere in the community remained tense. Discussions about racism and violence continued, and everyone felt the need to speak out. However, as the protest unfolded that afternoon, things escalated to a level of tension that was unprecedented. Jake stood among the crowd, feeling the excitement and determination of the participants. They chanted slogans and held signs with powerful messages. But alongside that, he felt a rising sense of anxiety. The images of the previous violent incident still haunted him, and he couldn't shake the worry about the potential for violence during this protest. As the crowd moved through the streets, Jake noticed a small group of protesters beginning to act out. They shouted, criticized the police, and some even started throwing objects toward the law enforcement officers. Jake's anxiety intensified. He knew that if the situation wasn't controlled, things could spiral out of control. "We need to stay calm," Jake shouted, trying to call for order. "This is a peaceful protest." But his voice was drowned out by the shouts and chaos. Jake felt as if he were standing in the middle of a storm, unsure of how to prevent things from worsening. He saw his colleagues who were trying to maintain order, but they too were beginning to feel the strain. Some of them had started to use force to control the crowd. "Jake, we need to intervene," one of his colleagues, Tom, said urgently. "If we don't, things will go too far." Jake felt a wave of anger rise within him. "We can't do that. They are fighting for their rights. We need to stay calm and find a way to talk." "Talk?" Tom replied, his tone filled with skepticism. "They don't want to talk. They just want to cause trouble." Jake felt conflicted. He knew that the protesters were fighting for a just cause, but he also understood that without control, the situation could worsen. He decided that he needed to take action, not just for Marcus, but for everyone in the community. "We need to do something to prevent this situation," Jake said, his voice filled with determination. "I will go talk to them." "Jake, no!" Tom shouted, but Jake turned away and walked toward the crowd. He felt his heart racing, but he knew this was necessary. As he approached the group of protesters, Jake took a deep breath and began to speak. "Everyone, I'm Jake, a police officer here. I understand that you're angry and want to be heard, but we need to stay calm. Acting out only makes things worse." A young man in the crowd with fire in his eyes stepped forward. "We can't be silent anymore. We've endured enough." "I understand," Jake said, trying to keep his voice steady. "But if you continue like this, you will only make the situation worse. We need to find a way to talk, not confront." But Jake's words did little to calm the anger in the crowd. Some people began to shout, and the atmosphere grew even tenser. Jake felt as if he were standing at a crossroads, unsure of what to do to prevent the situation from deteriorating. When an object flew toward the police line, Jake felt a surge of anger rise within him. He couldn't let this happen. "Stop!" he yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. He saw one of his colleagues, a rookie officer, being pushed back by the crowd. Fear and worry flooded Jake's heart. "We need to retreat," Tom shouted, but Jake couldn't accept that. He knew that if they retreated, everything would get worse. He decided that he needed to stand up for what was right. "No, we can't retreat," Jake said, his voice resolute. "We need to stand firm and find a way to talk to them. They are fighting for their rights, and we need to listen." Tom looked at Jake with a surprised expression. "Jake, what are you saying? We are the police. Our job is to maintain order." "Yes, but our job is also to protect the community," Jake replied, his voice firm. "If we can't listen and understand what they are going through, we will never create change." The confrontation between Jake and Tom grew tense. Other colleagues began to take notice of their argument. Jake felt as if he were caught in a battle not only with the crowd, but also with his fellow officers. He knew this was the time to show courage. "We can't keep going like this," Jake said, his voice rising above the chaos. "We need to change the way we interact with the community. If we don't, we will only create more division." Some of Jake's colleagues began to nod, and he felt a sense of hope rising within him. "Give me a chance to talk to them," Jake continued. "Let me stand between them and you. I will do my best to keep calm and find a solution." Finally, Tom sighed, and some other colleagues agreed as well. "Okay, but if things get worse, we will intervene," Tom said, his voice still filled with concern. Jake nodded, feeling a sense of relief. He turned back to the crowd, determined to find a way to keep calm and listen to what they were feeling. "Everyone," he called out, "I'm here to listen to you. Please tell me what you're going through." As the crowd began to quiet down, Jake felt a surge of hope. He knew this was an important step in building a bridge between the police and the community. This confrontation was not just a challenge for him, but an opportunity to create change. Jake was determined not only to stand up for what was right, but also to become part of the solution to the issues the community was facing. After the tense protest, Jake felt as if a new door had opened for both him and the community. Discussions about racism and violence were no longer just empty words. They had become an essential part of the police department's work. Jake and his colleagues began to realize that they needed to change the way they interacted with the community, and this was not just a task, but a responsibility. In the weeks that followed, the police department organized a series of training programs aimed at raising awareness about racism and effective communication with the community. Jake was involved in developing these programs, with support from Marcus and other community leaders. They invited social and psychological experts to share their knowledge and experiences, helping the officers better understand what the community was going through. "We need to listen," Jake said in a meeting with his colleagues. "We can't just stand here and give orders. We need to understand how they feel and why they feel that way." Marcus also participated in these training sessions, sharing his personal stories about the experiences he had faced in the community. "Each of us has a story," Marcus said. "If we don't share and listen to each other, we will never build trust." These training sessions not only helped the officers gain a better understanding of the community, but also created a safe space for everyone to share their opinions and feelings. Jake noticed that many of his colleagues began to change their perspectives on their work and their roles in the community. They were no longer just law enforcers. They were protectors and supporters of the community. In addition to the training programs, Jake and Marcus also began organizing community activities to improve the relationship between the police and the residents. They planned a community day where police officers and residents could meet, talk, and participate in fun activities. "We need to create opportunities for people to meet each other," Jake said. "If we only meet in tense situations, there will never be a connection." The community day took place on a sunny day, and the atmosphere was filled with excitement. Jake and Marcus prepared many engaging activities such as sports games, food stalls, and art performances. They also invited local organizations to participate to showcase the services they provided to the community. As the community day began, Jake felt a sense of nervousness. He stood next to Marcus, watching the residents of the community arrive. They laughed, chatted, and engaged in various activities. Jake realized that this was a wonderful opportunity to build relationships with the community. "Hello, everyone. I'm Jake, and I'm a police officer here," he announced over the microphone. "Today, we are not just police officers and residents. We are a community. Let's create a fun and meaningful day together." Applause erupted, and Jake felt a warm sensation in his heart. He saw his colleagues participating in the activities, playing games with children and chatting with adults. This made him proud of what they had achieved. Marcus also took part in the activities, leading a group of children in a sports game. "Let's play together and create beautiful memories," he said, his smile radiant. The children laughed and ran around, and Jake felt a wave of joy fill the air. Throughout the day, Jake and Marcus organized several interactive sessions where residents could share their thoughts and feelings about the relationship between the police and the community. They created a safe space for everyone to voice their concerns and desires. "We want to listen to you," Jake said. "Please tell us what you need from us." Many residents shared their stories, from positive experiences to the challenges they had faced. Jake felt moved as he listened to these narratives. He realized that everyone had their own story, and without listening and understanding, trust could never be built. As the community day came to an end, Jake felt a sense of happiness and hope. He knew this was just the beginning of a long process, but he believed they were heading in the right direction. The changes in the police department and the community's involvement had created a solid foundation for future development. "Thank you all for coming," Jake said in his closing speech. "We have created a wonderful day together, and I hope we will continue to build this relationship. We are a community, and we need to support each other." As people began to leave, Jake and Marcus exchanged smiles. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they were ready to continue this journey. The change had begun, and they would not stop until everyone in the community felt heard and respected. On a beautiful morning, Jake and Marcus attended a large event at the city's Central Park. This was an annual community festival where people from all over the city gathered to celebrate cultural diversity and the spirit of unity. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, music, and the delicious aromas from various food stalls. Jake felt excited as he saw the residents of the community, people he had come to know and understand better over the past few months. As Jake and Marcus strolled through the stalls, they noticed many people participating in fun activities, from sports games to artistic performances. Children were running around laughing, while adults chatted and shared their stories. Jake felt the connection and love in the air, something he had longed to see in his community. "Look, Jake!" Marcus pointed to a stall where a group of people was performing traditional dance. "We should join in." "Absolutely," Jake laughed, feeling enthusiastic. They joined in the dance, immersing themselves in the joyful atmosphere and the unity of everyone around them. In that moment, Jake felt he was not just a police officer, but also a part of the community, a friend, a companion. As the festival continued, Jake and Marcus had the opportunity to talk with many different residents. They listened to people's stories, from joys to sorrows, from successes to failures. Jake realized that everyone had their own story, and those stories created a diverse and rich tapestry of the community. "Thank you for coming here and listening to us," an elderly woman said to Jake and Marcus. "We feel respected and heard more than ever." "That's what we want," Jake replied, feeling warm inside. "We will continue to work to build this relationship." As the event neared its end, Jake stood next to Marcus, looking out at the crowd. He felt a sense of happiness wash over him. Their efforts were beginning to bear fruit, and the change they had longed for was gradually becoming a reality. However, Jake also had deeper thoughts. He remembered the challenges he had faced, the conflicts and tensions in his work. He had once felt confused and unsure of how to change the situation, but now he realized that change did not only come from grand decisions, but also from small, everyday actions. "Marcus," Jake said as they stood watching the crowd, "I've learned so much from this experience. I realize that listening and understanding are crucial. We can't just stand on one side and judge. We need to step into others' shoes to understand them better." "Exactly, Jake," Marcus agreed. "Change starts with us. If we want to see a better society, we need to work together, not just in difficult times, but also in joyful moments like this." Jake nodded, feeling a surge of hope in his heart. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also believed they were on the right path. Their efforts had begun to make a difference, and he felt proud of what they had achieved. "We need to continue organizing events like this," Jake said, "to give people the opportunity to meet, talk, and understand each other better. Only when we work together can we build a stronger community." "Absolutely," Marcus agreed. "And we also need to continue educating ourselves and others about diversity and mutual respect. Only when we understand and accept our differences can we move forward." As the festival came to a close, Jake and Marcus helped clean up the event area. They laughed and chatted with other participants, feeling like one big family. Jake realized that change was not just a goal, but a journey, and he was ready to continue that journey. As the sunset painted the sky with vibrant colors, Jake stood next to Marcus, looking out at the beautiful horizon. He felt a sense of peace in his heart. Although many challenges lay ahead, he believed that with unity and effort, they could create a better society. "Thank you for being with me on this journey, Marcus," Jake said, his voice filled with emotion. "I couldn't do this alone." "Thank you, Jake," Marcus replied, a smile on his face. "We will continue this journey together. We won't stop until everyone in the community feels heard and respected." As they left the park, Jake felt a renewed sense of hope within him. He knew that the future still held uncertainties, but he also believed that with determination and perseverance, they could create positive change. Their journey had only just begun, and Jake was ready to face any challenges ahead, with Marcus by his side, working together to build a better community for everyone. As the community began to feel the positive changes from Jake and Marcus's efforts, a group of extremists emerged, opposing any transformation they had worked hard to build. This group, calling themselves the Guardians of Tradition, started organizing protests and spreading misinformation about the police and community initiatives. They claimed that these changes were undermining their cultural values and traditions. Jake and Marcus first heard about this group when a friend in the community warned them about a protest the group planned to hold the following weekend. "They're calling for people to join in opposition to what you're doing," the friend said, voice filled with concern. "I'm afraid this could lead to violence." A chill ran down Jake's spine. "We need to prepare for this," he said to Marcus. "If they're going to protest, we need to ensure it remains peaceful." Marcus nodded, but he couldn't hide his worry. "I don't want to see people in my community get hurt. They might not understand what we're trying to do." As the protest date approached, Jake and Marcus organized a meeting with their colleagues in the police department to discuss how to handle the situation. They decided to have a police presence at the protest to ensure safety for everyone, but also to try to avoid escalating tensions. "We need to stay calm and listen," Jake said during the meeting. "If we can create a safe space for people to express their opinions, maybe we can prevent violence." However, as the protest day arrived, Jake felt the tension in the air. The guardians of tradition had gathered at a park near the city center, carrying banners and shouting slogans against the changes. They yelled and criticized the police and community efforts, claiming that these changes were weakening their cultural values. Jake and Marcus stood to one side, observing the situation. They noticed some individuals in the protest group becoming agitated, and Jake felt a growing concern about the potential for violence. "We need to act," Jake said to Marcus. "If we don't, things could get worse." "We need to stay calm," Marcus replied, but his voice was also filled with anxiety. "If we're not careful, this could lead to a major conflict." As the protest continued, some members of the Guardians of Tradition began shouting and attacking those who supported the changes. They called the participants traitors and destroyers. Jake felt a surge of anger rise within him. He knew these people didn't understand what they were doing, and that frustrated him. "We need to talk to them," Jake said, determined. "If we can't listen to their concerns, we'll never create change." Marcus looked at Jake with a worried expression. "Jake, be careful. They might not want to hear us." But Jake had made up his mind. He stepped toward the protest group, feeling his heart race. As he approached, he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Everyone, I'm Jake, a police officer here. I understand that you're angry and have concerns, but we need to talk to each other, not just shout." A man in the protest group with a hateful glare stepped forward. "You're destroying our traditions. You have no right to interfere in our lives." "We don't want to destroy anything," Jake said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We just want to build a better community for everyone. We want to hear your concerns." But Jake's words did little to calm the anger in the crowd. Some people began to shout at him, while others started throwing objects in his direction. Jake felt a wave of frustration and anger rise within him. He knew they were trying to do the right thing, but the hatred and ignorance of this group were obstructing all their efforts. "We need to retreat," Marcus shouted. But Jake couldn't accept that. "We can't let them win," he said, his voice resolute. "We need to stand firm and continue fighting for what's right." As tensions escalated, Jake felt a sense of anxiety swell within him. He knew that without intervention, things could spiral out of control. "We need to stay calm," Jake said to Marcus. "If we don't, we won't be able to create change." Marcus nodded, but he also felt worried. "I don't want to see anyone get hurt," he said. "We need to find a way to resolve this situation without causing violence." Ultimately, Jake decided they needed to find a way to engage in dialogue with the Guardians of Tradition. He turned back to the crowd and said, "We're not here to cause trouble. We just want to listen and understand how you feel. Please share your concerns with us." Some people in the crowd began to listen, but the animosity still lingered. Jake felt as if he were standing in the middle of a storm, unsure of what to do to prevent the situation from worsening. He knew this was a significant challenge, not just for himself, but for the relationship between the police and the community. As the protests continued, Jake and Marcus faced threats from this group. They felt the strain on their relationship as their efforts to build unity were threatened by hatred and misunderstanding. Jake knew they needed to find a way to overcome this challenge, not just for themselves, but for the future of the community. "We will not give up," Jake said to Marcus, his voice determined. "We will continue to fight for what's right, despite these villains." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of resolve rise within him. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they also believed that with perseverance and courage, they could overcome any challenge. Jake stood by the window, gazing outside as the sunlight gradually faded, giving way to the darkness of the evening. Inside him, a storm of emotions was brewing. Recent events had left him with a heavy feeling, as if he were caught between two worlds, unsure of which side to choose. As a police officer, Jake had been taught that his duty was to maintain order and protect the community. But now, with the rising tensions between the police and the community, he felt as though he was trapped between conflicting expectations. "Jake, are you okay?" Marcus asked, entering the room with a steaming cup of tea. He noticed the worried expression on his friend's face and felt the need to do something to help. Jake turned around, trying to force a smile but unable to hide the fatigue in his eyes. "I don't know, Marcus. I feel like I'm in the middle of a battle and I don't know which side is right." "That's a normal feeling," Marcus said, sitting down next to Jake. You're facing a lot of pressure, but remember, you're not alone in this fight. Jake sighed, feeling the anxiety swell within him. I'm not just a police officer, I'm also part of this community. But when I stand between the protesters and the supporters, I don't know what to do. I'm afraid that any decision I make will hurt someone. Marcus nodded, understanding what Jake was going through. I know it's tough, but remember, you can do what's right without having to choose a side. You can be a bridge between these two worlds. A bridge, Jake repeated, feeling a glimmer of hope. But how can I do that when both sides are so angry? By listening, Marcus said, his gaze steady. You can create a safe space for people to express their opinions without fear of being criticized. You can help them understand each other better. Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him as he heard Marcus's words. Maybe I need to change my perspective on this situation. Instead of seeing it as a battle, perhaps I should view it as an opportunity to build a bridge. Exactly, Marcus said, a smile spreading across his face. And I'll be here to support you through this process. We can work together to create positive change. Jake felt warmth in his heart as he listened to Marcus's encouragement. He knew he couldn't do this alone. Thank you, Marcus. I really need your support. Always, Marcus replied, giving Jake a reassuring pat on the shoulder. We'll get through this together. You don't have to face this alone. As night fell, Jake and Marcus discussed how they could organize a community meeting to create a safe space for everyone to express their opinions. They planned a gathering where both supporters and opponents could come together and share their viewpoints without fear of judgment. We need to create an environment where everyone feels comfortable voicing their thoughts, Jake said, feeling a surge of determination. If we can do that, maybe we'll find some common ground. Absolutely, Marcus agreed. And we also need to prepare for potential reactions. Not everyone will agree with us, but it's important that we stay calm and listen. Jake felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he thought about the upcoming meeting. He knew it would be a significant challenge, but with Marcus's support, he felt more confident. I'm going to do this, Jake said, his voice resolute. I won't let anxiety and pressure hold me back. That's the spirit, Marcus exclaimed, a bright smile on his face. We'll do this together. You're not alone. As they continued to discuss their plans, Jake felt a sense of relief gradually spreading through him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Marcus by his side, he felt he could overcome any challenge. His inner struggle was not just about standing between two worlds, but about finding a way to connect and build a stronger community. As the night wore on, Jake felt a renewed sense of hope within him. He knew he could do what was right, and with Marcus beside him, they would work together to create positive change for the community. Jake's inner battle was not just a personal struggle, but a journey to find ways to connect and build bridges between different people, all striving for a better future together. Jake had once believed that his life would be filled with good things, that the people around him were all sincere friends. But everything changed when an old friend, Alex, whom he had considered a brother, betrayed him in a cruel way. This betrayal not only hurt Jake emotionally, but also made him lose faith in everyone around him. Alex and Jake had shared a beautiful friendship since their high school days. They had gone through many ups and downs together, from afternoons playing basketball to late nights studying. Jake had always trusted Alex, sharing with him his deepest secrets. But now, upon discovering that Alex had secretly spoken ill of him to others, Jake felt as if his world had collapsed. He could not understand why someone he had placed his complete trust in could do such a thing. The feelings of loneliness and disappointment enveloped Jake. He not only lost a friend, but also lost faith in all other relationships. Every time he saw an old friend or an acquaintance, he felt suspicion. Could they be sincere with him, or were they just waiting for an opportunity to betray him? These questions kept repeating in Jake's mind, preventing him from finding peace within himself. While Jake was drowning in negative thoughts, Marcus, another friend, noticed the change in his mood. Marcus was always optimistic and believed in the good things in life. He had gone through similar hardships and understood the feelings Jake was facing. One afternoon, Marcus decided to invite Jake for a walk to talk. Jake, I've noticed you haven't been happy lately. What's going on? Marcus asked, his eyes filled with concern. Jake sighed. I don't know, Marcus. I feel like everyone around me is untrustworthy. Alex betrayed me and now I can't trust anyone. Marcus listened without interrupting. After Jake finished speaking, he began to share his thoughts. I understand how you feel, but do you know that not everyone is like Alex? There are many people around you who still love and support you. Don't let one person ruin your trust in everyone else. Jake looked at Marcus, feeling a glimmer of hope. But how can I know who is good and who is bad? I don't want to get hurt again. It is indeed difficult, Marcus admitted. But life is a journey, and along that journey, we will meet many people. Some will hurt us, but others will bring joy and happiness. You can't close your heart forever just because of one betrayal. Marcus continued. Remember, trust is an important part of life. It helps us connect with each other and build meaningful relationships. If you give up on trust, you will miss out on many beautiful things. Give yourself a chance to open up and seek out those who are worthy. Marcus's words were like a faint light in the darkness. Jake began to think about the other friends in his life. They might not be perfect, but they had always been there for him in difficult times. They had shared joys, sorrows, and beautiful memories. Was it worth it to give up everything just because of one person? Thank you, Marcus, Jake said, his voice lighter. I will try to open up more. I don't want to live in suspicion and fear forever. That's the spirit, Marcus smiled, patting Jake on the back. Remember, trust isn't easy, but it's necessary. Give yourself time and space to heal. Then you will see that life still has many good things waiting for you. The conversation with Marcus helped Jake realize that although Alex's betrayal had hurt him, he could not let it define his life. He decided not to let this pain overshadow his other relationships. Jake knew that rebuilding trust would take time, but he was ready to start that journey. As they returned from their walk, Jake felt lighter. He had made a decision. He would open his heart to those around him and give them a chance to prove that they were worthy of his trust. Life could not be based on one bad experience, and Jake was ready to continue fighting for what was right. And so, a new chapter in Jake's life began. He no longer lived in fear and suspicion. Instead, he chose trust and hope. With each passing day, he would learn to love and trust again, not only in others but also in himself. After the deep conversation with Marcus, Jake felt energized and determined. He realized that he could not just sit back and wait for change. He needed to take action. With Marcus's support, Jake decided to organize a large event to raise awareness about the issue of racial discrimination, a problem he had witnessed and felt deeply in his community. Jake and Marcus sat down together to plan the event. They wanted to create a safe and positive space where people could share their stories, listen, and learn from one another. We need a name for this event, Marcus said, his eyes lighting up with ideas. How about Unity Day or Our Voices? Our Voices sounds great, Jake agreed. It conveys that we all have a voice in our own stories. We need to create a platform for people to share and understand each other better. They decided to hold the event at a large park in the city, where there would be ample space for activities and participants. Jake and Marcus began to list activities for the event: discussion panels, artistic performances, and informational booths about racial discrimination. They also wanted to invite speakers who had experience and knowledge about the issue to share their perspectives. Once the plan was in place, Jake and Marcus got to work preparing. They started by reaching out to community organizations, schools, and youth groups to invite them to participate. However, not everything went smoothly. They faced many challenges in attracting people's interest. It seems like people aren't really interested in this event, Marcus sighed after a meeting with a local organization. They think it's just another event with nothing new to offer. Jake nodded, feeling discouraged. Maybe we need to change our approach. We need to show them that this issue is truly important and affects their lives. They decided to create a short video to introduce the event, featuring stories from individuals who had experienced racial discrimination. They hoped that sharing personal experiences would help people feel more connected to the issue. Jake spent hours interviewing people in the community, recording their stories, and editing them into a moving video. Once the video was complete, they posted it on social media and sent it to organizations and schools. Feedback from the community began to pour in. Many expressed interest and wanted to participate in the event. This renewed Jake and Marcus's motivation. However, challenges continued to arise. They needed to obtain permission from the local government to hold the event in the park. This process was not simple. They had to fill out numerous forms, provide detailed information about the event, and persuade officials that it would benefit the community. We need to prepare for the meeting with them, Marcus said as they sat down to discuss their plan. We need to have a clear and convincing presentation. Jake agreed. They spent hours preparing their presentation, rehearsing, and refining every detail. Finally, when the meeting day arrived, they felt nervous but also determined. They presented the importance of the event, the activities that would take place, and how it could help raise awareness about racial discrimination in the community. After a long wait, they received notification that the event had been approved. Joy and excitement filled Jake and Marcus's hearts. They knew this was just the first step, but it gave them the motivation to keep going. As the event date approached, Jake and Marcus faced more challenges. They needed to recruit more volunteers to help organize the event. They launched a campaign on social media, calling for people to join and support. Many young people volunteered to help, from setting up booths to guiding attendees. However, not everyone supported this event. Some people in the community expressed opposition, arguing that organizing such an event would only increase division. Jake and Marcus had to deal with negative comments on social media, but they refused to let that discourage them. They knew that what they were doing was right and necessary. "We can't let negative opinions hold us back," Marcus said as they discussed the unfavorable feedback. "We need to focus on the supporters and those who will participate in the event." Jake agreed. They decided to hold a small gathering with supporters to discuss the event and how to spread the message. The meeting was successful, and many expressed excitement and readiness to participate. Finally, after weeks of preparation, the day of the event arrived. Jake and Marcus stood at the entrance of the park, watching as participants began to arrive. They felt nervous but also proud. This was not just an event. It was a significant step toward raising awareness about racial discrimination in their community. As the event unfolded, Jake and Marcus witnessed stories being shared, laughter, and even tears. They knew they had accomplished something meaningful, and their decisive action had begun to create change. The day Jake and Marcus had poured all their efforts into finally arrived. The park, where the Our Voices event was being held, was buzzing with energy from early morning. Booths were set up, informational boards were carefully decorated, and the main stage was ready to welcome speakers and performers. Jake stood in the middle of the park, looking around and feeling a surge of pride. This wasn't just an event, it was a major step forward in his and Marcus's journey to raise awareness about racial discrimination. From early morning, people began to pour into the park. Families with children, groups of young friends, and even older members of the community came with curiosity and a desire to learn and listen. Informational booths were set up along the main pathway, where nonprofit organizations and community groups shared materials, stories, and solutions to combat racial discrimination. Some booths even hosted interactive activities, such as educational games and awareness quizzes, which attracted many participants. The main stage was the heart of the event. One by one, speakers stepped up to share deeply emotional personal stories about how they had faced racial discrimination in their lives. One of the speakers, Mrs. Linda, a retired teacher, recounted the hardships she and her family endured while living in a prejudiced neighborhood. Her story brought many to tears, but also inspired a strong sense of resilience and hope. In addition to the speeches, the event featured remarkable artistic performances. A young band performed an original song about unity and love, earning thunderous applause from the crowd. A graffiti artist created a large mural live at the event, with the message "We are one" written in multiple languages. The mural quickly became a highlight, drawing people to take photos and share them on social media. Jake and Marcus moved constantly throughout the event, ensuring everything ran smoothly. They greeted attendees, answered questions, and listened to feedback from participants. "Do you see this, Jake?" Marcus said, his eyes shining with excitement. "We did it. Look at everyone. They're listening, they're learning. This is exactly what we wanted." Jake smiled, feeling an indescribable sense of happiness. "Yes, Marcus, but this is just the beginning. We still have a lot of work to do." The Our Voices event not only attracted the attention of those who attended in person, but also caught the eye of local media. Reporters from newspapers and television stations were present, capturing memorable moments and interviewing Jake, Marcus, and the speakers. A front-page article in the local newspaper the next day called the event a significant step forward in raising awareness about racial discrimination in the community. However, not all reactions from the community were positive. While many praised the event as a meaningful and necessary initiative, others expressed skepticism and even opposition. On social media, posts about the event received hundreds of comments, both positive and negative. Supporters of the event shared their thoughts. One participant wrote, "I learned so much from this event. The stories shared truly touched my heart. This is a reminder that we need to stand together and treat each other with respect. Another commented, "Thank you, Jake and Marcus, for organizing such a wonderful event. This is exactly what our community needs." On the other hand, there were also dissenting opinions. Some people argued that the event only served to deepen divisions within the community. One negative comment read, "Why do we keep talking about racial discrimination? We should focus on positive things instead of bringing up sensitive issues." Another person even criticized Jake and Marcus, accusing them of overreacting and seeking attention. These mixed reactions gave Jake and Marcus a lot to think about. After the event, they sat down together to reflect on what had happened. "What do you think about the negative opinions?" Jake asked, his voice thoughtful. Marcus sighed. "I think that whenever we try to change something, there will always be people who oppose it. But that doesn't mean we're wrong. What we did today touched a lot of people, and that's what matters." Jake nodded, agreeing with Marcus. "You're right, we can't please everyone. But if this event can change the mindset of even a few people, then it was worth it." The Our Voices event was not just a day for sharing and learning. It was also a catalyst for deeper discussions within the community. The stories shared at the event made many people start to think about how they treated others and the biases they might unknowingly carry. Some schools and local organizations reached out to Jake and Marcus, expressing interest in collaborating to host similar workshops and activities. However, the controversy surrounding the event also highlighted that changing perceptions is not an easy task. Jake and Marcus understood that this was only the first step in a long journey. They knew that to create real change, they needed to keep working, keep listening, and keep taking action. As the day came to an end, Jake stood on the stage looking out at the crowd slowly dispersing. He felt exhausted but also filled with hope. "We did something big today," he said to Marcus, "and I believe this is just the beginning." Marcus smiled, patting Jake on the shoulder. "That's right. We've planted a seed. Now it's time to wait for it to grow." The aftermath of the Our Voices event was both a whirlwind of emotions and a test of resilience for Jake and Marcus. The event had been a success in many ways, but it also left behind a trail of challenges, criticisms, and unexpected consequences. As the days passed, the ripple effects of their efforts began to unfold, bringing both positive and negative outcomes that neither of them had fully anticipated. The positive impact of the event was undeniable. Many people in the community had been deeply moved by the stories shared and the messages conveyed during the event. Schools began incorporating discussions about racial discrimination into their curriculums, and local organizations reached out to Jake and Marcus, expressing interest in collaborating on future initiatives. Social media was flooded with posts from attendees who shared their experiences, photos, and reflections. The mural created during the event, with its powerful message of unity, became a symbol of hope and was widely shared online. One particularly touching moment came when a young woman approached Jake a few days after the event. She told him how the stories shared during the event had given her the courage to speak up about the discrimination she had faced at her workplace. "I've always been afraid to say anything," she said, her voice trembling. "But after hearing everyone's stories, I realized I'm not alone. Thank you for giving us a platform." These moments of gratitude and change were what Jake and Marcus had hoped for. They felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that their efforts had sparked important conversations and inspired action. However, the event also brought with it a wave of criticism and backlash that neither of them had fully prepared for. On social media, alongside the positive comments, there were also harsh criticisms. Some accused Jake and Marcus of being divisive, claiming that the event had only highlighted differences rather than fostering unity. Others dismissed the event as performative, suggesting that it was more about gaining attention than creating real change. A few even went as far as to send hateful messages, questioning their motives and attacking their character. The local media, which had initially praised the event, began publishing opinion pieces that were more critical. One article questioned whether the event had truly addressed the root causes of racial discrimination, or if it had merely scratched the surface. Another piece accused Jake and Marcus of being naive, arguing that real change required systemic efforts rather than community events. These criticisms weighed heavily on both of them, but especially on Jake. He had poured his heart and soul into the event, and while he had expected some pushback, the intensity of the negativity caught him off guard. He began to question whether they had done enough, whether they had approached the issue in the right way, and whether they had made a mistake by putting themselves in the spotlight. As the pressure mounted, the once solid partnership between Jake and Marcus began to show cracks. The two had always worked well together, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. But now, under the weight of public scrutiny and personal doubt, their differences started to surface. Jake, who was naturally introspective and sensitive, found himself dwelling on the criticisms. He spent hours reading through comments online, trying to understand where they had gone wrong. "Maybe they're right," he said one evening, his voice heavy with doubt. "Maybe we didn't do enough. Maybe we should have focused on something more concrete, like policy changes or legal reforms." Marcus, on the other hand, was more pragmatic and optimistic. He believed that the event had been a success and that the criticisms were simply part of the process. "Jake, we can't please everyone," he said, trying to reassure his friend. "What we did was important. We started a conversation, and that's the first step. Change doesn't happen overnight." But Jake wasn't convinced. "It's not just about pleasing people, Marcus. It's about making a real difference. What if all we did was make people feel good for a day and then nothing changes?" The tension between them grew as they struggled to navigate the aftermath of the event. Marcus felt frustrated by Jake's constant self-doubt and negativity, while Jake felt that Marcus was dismissing valid criticisms and not taking the backlash seriously enough. Their conversations, which had once been filled with excitement and shared vision, became strained and argumentative. One evening, during a particularly heated discussion, Marcus finally snapped. "You know what, Jake? Maybe the problem isn't the event or the criticisms. Maybe the problem is that you're too afraid to accept that we did something good. You're so focused on what went wrong that you can't see what went right." Jake, taken aback by Marcus's outburst, responded defensively. "And maybe you're too quick to brush off the criticisms because you don't want to admit that we could have done better. Just because people showed up doesn't mean we succeeded." The argument ended with both of them walking away, leaving a heavy silence between them. For the first time since they had started working together, Jake and Marcus felt disconnected, unsure of how to move forward. Despite the tension, both Jake and Marcus knew that they couldn't let their differences tear them apart. They had come too far and achieved too much to let their partnership crumble. After a few days of reflection, Marcus reached out to Jake, suggesting that they sit down and talk things through. When they met, the conversation was honest and raw. Jake admitted that he had been struggling with the weight of the criticisms and his own insecurities. I wanted this to be perfect," he said, his voice breaking. "I wanted to prove that we could make a difference. And when people started pointing out the flaws, it felt like I had failed." Marcus listened, his frustration giving way to understanding. "Jake, I get it. I really do. But we can't let the fear of failure stop us from trying. No event is perfect, and no effort is without flaws. What matters is that we tried, and we made an impact. We can learn from this and do better next time." Jake nodded, realizing that Marcus was right. The event had been a starting point, not an end point. It was natural for there to be challenges and criticisms, but those didn't negate the positive impact they had made. In turn, Marcus acknowledged that he could have been more empathetic to Jake's concerns. "I know I can be a little too optimistic sometimes," he admitted, "but that's just how I cope with pressure. I didn't mean to dismiss your feelings or the criticisms. I just didn't want us to lose sight of what we accomplished." The conversation marked a turning point for their relationship. They agreed to take a step back, reflect on the lessons from the event, and plan their next steps with a clearer perspective. They also decided to seek feedback from trusted mentors and community members to help them grow and improve. The aftermath of the Our Voices event was a reminder that change is never easy and that every effort comes with its own set of challenges. For Jake and Marcus, it was a test of their resilience, their partnership, and their commitment to their cause. While the event had brought both triumphs and trials, it had also strengthened their resolve to keep fighting for what they believed in. As they began to plan their next initiative, Jake and Marcus knew that the road ahead would not be easy. But they also knew that they were stronger together and that every step forward, no matter how small, was a step toward a better future. Jake had always been someone who sought answers. After the Our Voices event and the subsequent backlash, he couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The criticisms, the coordinated attacks on social media, and the whispers of dissent in the community felt too organized to be random. It wasn't just about differing opinions anymore. There was a pattern, a deliberate effort to undermine everything he and Marcus had worked for. Jake decided it was time to dig deeper, to uncover the truth behind the resistance they were facing. Jake began his investigation quietly, not even telling Marcus at first. He didn't want to raise false alarms or create unnecessary tension. Instead, he started by revisiting the comments and messages they had received after the event. While many were from individuals expressing their opinions, there were others that stood out. Accounts with no profile pictures, vague usernames, and messages that seemed eerily similar in tone and language. It was as if they were part of a coordinated effort to discredit the event. He spent hours combing through social media, tracing the origins of these accounts. Some of them were linked to groups that had a history of opposing social justice initiatives. Others seemed to be bots, programmed to flood posts with negativity. But what caught Jake's attention the most was a particular group of accounts that all referenced the same organization, a shadowy group called the Vanguard. Jake had heard whispers about the Vanguard before. They were rumored to be a well-funded organization that operated in the shadows, working to maintain the status quo and suppress movements that threatened their interests. They were known for using misinformation, intimidation, and even sabotage to achieve their goals. The more Jake read about them, the more he became convinced that they were behind the backlash against our voices. But Jake needed more than just suspicions. He needed proof. He decided to reach out to a journalist he had met during the event, a woman named Clara, who had a reputation for uncovering hidden truths. Clara was intrigued by Jake's findings and agreed to help him dig deeper. Together, they began piecing together the puzzle, following leads and connecting dots. Their investigation led them to a series of leaked documents that had been circulating on the dark web. These documents, if authentic, revealed the Vanguard's strategies for undermining grassroots movements. They detailed how the group used social media to spread disinformation, how they funded local influencers to sow doubt, and how they infiltrated communities to gather intelligence. Jake was horrified by what he read. It wasn't just about our voices. The Vanguard had been targeting similar events and initiatives across the country. As Jake and Clara delved deeper, they uncovered even more shocking secrets. One of the documents mentioned a local contact who had been working with the Vanguard to disrupt the Our Voices event. Jake's heart sank as he read the name, Alex. Alex had once been one of Jake's closest friends, but their relationship had soured after Alex betrayed him. Jake had thought he had moved on, but now it seemed that Alex's betrayal ran deeper than he had imagined. According to the documents, Alex had been feeding the Vanguard information about the event, including details about the speakers, the schedule, and even Jake and Marcus's personal lives. In return, Alex had received money and promises of influence within the community. Jake felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could Alex have done this? Was it out of spite, or had he been manipulated by the Vanguard? Jake knew he needed answers, but confronting Alex wouldn't be easy. He decided to confide in Marcus, knowing that he couldn't face this alone. When Jake told Marcus about his findings, Marcus was initially skeptical. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "I mean, Alex has always been a jerk, but working with a group like the Vanguard? That's a whole new level." "I'm sure," Jake said, his voice firm. "The documents mention him by name. He's been feeding them information, Marcus. He's the reason we've been facing so much resistance." Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This is bigger than I thought. If the Vanguard is involved, we're not just dealing with a few angry people on social media. This is a coordinated attack." The two of them decided to confront Alex together. They found him at a local bar, sitting alone in a corner booth. When Alex saw them approach, his expression shifted from surprise to defensiveness. "What do you want?" he asked, his tone sharp. "We know what you've been doing," Jake said, sliding into the booth across from Alex. "We know you've been working with the Vanguard." Alex's eyes widened for a moment before narrowing. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Don't lie to us," Marcus said, his voice low and steady. "We've seen the documents. We know you've been feeding them information about the event. Why, Alex? Why would you do this?" For a moment, Alex said nothing. Then he leaned back in his seat, a bitter smile on his face. "You want to know why? Because people like you think you can change the world with your little events and your speeches. But the world doesn't work that way. The Vanguard understands that. They're not trying to destroy anything. They're just keeping things in balance." "Balance?" Jake repeated, his voice rising. "You call spreading lies and sabotaging people's efforts balance? You've been helping them tear down everything we've worked for." Alex shrugged. "It's not personal, Jake. It's just the way things are. You can't fight the system. Jake felt a surge of anger, but Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder, silently urging him to stay calm. "You've made your choice, Alex," Marcus said, his voice cold. "But don't think for a second that we're going to stop. We're going to expose the vanguard, and we're going to make sure everyone knows what you've done." As they left the bar, Jake felt a mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, and determination. Alex's words had only strengthened his resolve. He and Marcus weren't just fighting for their event anymore. They were fighting against a system that thrived on fear and division. The secrets they had uncovered were just the beginning. Jake knew that exposing the vanguard wouldn't be easy, but he also knew that the truth was worth fighting for. As he and Marcus walked into the night, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but they were ready to face whatever came next. Jake and Marcus had been preparing for this moment for a long time. After uncovering the truth about the vanguard and Alex's role in sabotaging the Our Voices event, they knew that the fight wasn't just about organizing community events or facing criticism anymore. This was a real battle, and to win, they had to confront the people behind all the schemes directly. In the weeks following the revelations, Jake and Marcus quietly gathered more evidence. With the help of Clara, the journalist Jake had worked with earlier, they tracked down a secret location where the vanguard held their meetings and coordinated their operations. It was an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place no one would pay attention to. Clara had warned them about the dangers of confronting the vanguard directly, but Jake and Marcus felt they had no other choice. They knew that if they didn't act, the vanguard would continue to sabotage their efforts and those of others trying to create change. That night, Jake and Marcus stood outside the warehouse, the dim light from the street lamps casting long shadows over the desolate area. They carried a bag containing the documents and evidence they had collected, hoping that confronting the vanguard face-to-face would force them to back down. But both of them knew things might not go as planned. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked, his voice low and more serious than usual. Jake nodded, his eyes resolute. "We can't back down now, Marcus. If we don't do something, they'll keep destroying everything. This is our only chance to stop them." Marcus sighed, but he knew Jake was right. "All right, but be careful. We don't know what they're capable of." They stepped into the warehouse where the cold, dark space seemed to swallow them whole. Their footsteps echoed in the emptiness, but Jake and Marcus knew they weren't alone. At the far end of the warehouse, a group of people stood waiting. Leading them was a middle-aged man with an air of authority and piercing eyes. Jake recognized him immediately. It was Richard Kane, the head of the vanguard. "Well, Jake and Marcus," Richard said, his voice deep and laced with mockery, "I must admit you're persistent. But do you really think you can change anything?" Jake stepped forward, unflinching. "We don't just think, we know we can, and we won't let you keep sabotaging our efforts." Richard chuckled, his gaze shifting to Marcus. "You're so naive. The world doesn't change because of a few events or speeches. You're fighting a system that's been in place for centuries. Do you really think you can win?" "We're not fighting alone," Marcus replied, his voice steady and full of determination. "The community is behind us, and the truth is always stronger than your lies." Richard smirked and gestured to the people behind him. Immediately, a group of individuals stepped forward, surrounding Jake and Marcus. The tension in the air was palpable, and Jake knew they were in real danger. But he didn't back down. He pulled out the bag containing the documents and held it up. "We have evidence," Jake said loudly. "We know what you've done, from sabotaging our event to spreading misinformation, and we're going to make it all public." Richard glanced at the bag, but instead of looking worried, he simply laughed. "You think a few pieces of paper can scare me? You don't understand real power, Jake. Power isn't in the truth. It's in controlling the story people believe." Before Jake could respond, one of Richard's men lunged forward, trying to grab the bag. Marcus reacted quickly, shoving Jake aside and stepping in to confront the attacker. A scuffle broke out, and the warehouse quickly turned into a chaotic battleground. Jake clung tightly to the bag, trying to protect the evidence, while Marcus fought off the people surrounding them. In the chaos, Marcus was knocked to the ground, but he refused to give up. He tackled another attacker, creating an opening for Jake to escape. "Run, Jake!" Marcus shouted. "Get the evidence out of here!" "No, I'm not leaving you!" Jake yelled back, but Marcus looked at him with fierce determination. "You have to do this, Jake. If you don't, everything we've worked for will mean nothing." Jake hesitated, but he knew Marcus was right. With one last look at his friend, He turned and ran out of the warehouse, clutching the bag tightly. Behind him, Marcus continued to fight, holding off their pursuers to give Jake a chance to escape. As Jake ran into the night, he heard Marcus's shout echo through the darkness. He wanted to turn back, but he knew that if he did, neither of them would make it out. Tears streamed down his face, but he kept running, determined to protect the evidence they had risked everything to gather. Jake didn't know how far he had run, but when he finally stopped, he realized he was safe. He opened the bag, looking at the documents inside, and felt a sharp pain in his chest. Marcus had sacrificed himself to protect what they believed in, and now it was up to Jake to ensure that sacrifice wasn't in vain. The next day, Jake made everything they had uncovered public. With Clara's help, he released the evidence to the media, exposing the vanguard and their actions. The story spread quickly, and the community began to rise up against those who had tried to divide and manipulate them. But for Jake, the victory was bittersweet. He had lost a friend, a partner, and the pain of that loss would stay with him forever. Still, he knew Marcus wouldn't want him to stop. Marcus's sacrifice had become the driving force behind Jake's resolve to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for everyone who believed in a better future. In the days that followed, Jake stood before the mural from the Our Voices event, where the words "We are one" were still painted boldly. He placed his hand on the wall, silently promising Marcus that he would continue the path they had started, no matter how difficult it became. The days following the exposure of the vanguard were a whirlwind of emotions for Jake and the community. The truth had come to light, and the shadowy organization that had worked so hard to divide them was finally dismantled. But the scars left behind by the conflict ran deep. Trust had been broken, relationships strained, and the community was left grappling with the aftermath of the chaos. For Jake, the victory felt hollow without Marcus by his side. Yet he knew that Marcus's sacrifice had paved the way for something greater, a chance to rebuild, to heal, and to create lasting change. The first step toward healing was acknowledging the pain. Jake organized a series of community meetings, inviting people from all walks of life to come together and share their experiences. These gatherings were raw and emotional, with many expressing their anger, fear, and frustration over what had happened. But they also became a space for understanding and connection. People who had once been divided by mistrust began to see each other as allies rather than enemies. One of the most powerful moments came during a meeting where a local police officer, Officer Ramirez, stood up to speak. The relationship between the police and the community had been strained for years, and the events surrounding Our Voices had only deepened the divide. But Ramirez, a young officer who had grown up in the same neighborhood, spoke with sincerity. "I know that many of you don't trust us," Ramirez said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I understand why. But I want you to know that there are people within the force who want to see change, who want to work with you, not against you. We can't undo the past, but we can build a better future, together." His words were met with silence at first, but then an older woman in the crowd, Mrs. Carter, stood up. She had been one of the most vocal critics of the police, having lost her son to police violence years ago. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I've carried anger in my heart for a long time," she said. "And I don't know if I can ever forgive, but I'm willing to try. If you're serious about working with us, then I'll do my part too." That moment marked a turning point. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. Jake watched as people began to open up, sharing their stories and listening to one another. He realized that healing wasn't about erasing the pain, it was about finding a way to move forward despite it. For Jake, the journey toward peace was deeply personal. Marcus's death had left a void in his life, but it had also ignited a fire within him. He no longer saw himself as just an organizer or an activist. He had become a leader, someone the community looked to for guidance and hope. It was a role he hadn't sought, but one he embraced with a sense of responsibility and purpose. Jake began working closely with local leaders, including Officer Ramirez, to bridge the gap between the police and the community. Together, they launched a series of initiatives aimed at fostering trust and accountability. One of the first projects was a community police dialogue program, where residents and officers could come together in a safe space to discuss their concerns and find common ground. The program wasn't without its challenges. There were heated arguments, moments of tension, and even walkouts. But Jake remained patient, mediating the discussions and reminding everyone of their shared goal. Over time, progress was made. officers began to understand the community's perspective, and residents started to see the human side of the police. Jake also worked to address systemic issues within the police force. He advocated for better training on de-escalation techniques, implicit bias, and community engagement. He pushed for the creation of a civilian oversight board to hold officers accountable for misconduct. These efforts were met with resistance from some within the force, but Jake refused to back down. He knew that real change required persistence and courage. At the same time, Jake focused on rebuilding the community's sense of unity. He organized events that celebrated their diversity and resilience, from cultural festivals to volunteer projects. The mural from the Our Voices event, which had become a symbol of hope, was restored and expanded with new artwork contributed by local artists. It now featured images of Marcus and others who had fought for justice, serving as a reminder of their sacrifices and the strength of the community. Months passed, and the community began to heal. The changes Jake and his team had implemented were starting to take root. Crime rates in the neighborhood decreased as trust between residents and the police improved. Schools began incorporating lessons on social justice and community building into their curriculums. Local businesses, inspired by the movement, started hiring more from within the community and supporting grassroots initiatives. One day, Jake stood in front of the mural, reflecting on how far they had come. He thought about Marcus and the promise he had made to continue their work. He felt a sense of pride, not in himself, but in the people around him, the neighbors who had come together despite their differences, the officers who had chosen to listen and learn, and the young people who were now stepping up to lead the next generation. As he stood there, Officer Ramirez approached him. "You've done something incredible here, Jake," he said. "I don't think any of this would have been possible without you." Jake shook his head. "It wasn't just me, it was all of us. Marcus, the community, even you. We all played a part," Ramirez smiled. "Still, you've shown us what leadership looks like. You've shown us that change is possible." Jake looked at the mural, his eyes lingering on Marcus's image. "Marcus taught me that. He believed in this community, even when it was hard. I'm just trying to live up to his example." While the community had made significant progress, Jake knew that the work was far from over. There were still challenges to face, injustices to fight, and bridges to build. But he also knew that they were stronger now, more united and resilient than ever before. Jake continued to lead with humility and determination, always keeping Marcus's memory close to his heart. He became a mentor to young activists, sharing the lessons he had learned and encouraging them to dream big. He reminded them that change didn't happen overnight, but through persistence, collaboration, and a belief in the power of people coming together. As the sun set over the neighborhood, casting a warm glow on the mural, Jake felt a sense of peace. It wasn't the absence of conflict or struggle, but the presence of hope and the knowledge that they were moving in the right direction. The community had been tested, but they had emerged stronger, ready to face whatever came next. And Jake, now a true leader, stood at the heart of it all, carrying forward the legacy of those who had fought before him and paving the way for a brighter future. The sun rose over the neighborhood, casting a golden light on the streets that had once been filled with tension and division. Now, they were alive with the sounds of laughter, conversation, and the hum of a community that had found its way back to unity. The mural from the Our Voices event stood proudly in the town square, its vibrant colors a testament to the resilience and strength of the people who had fought for change. It had grown over time, with new sections added by local artists and children, each stroke of paint telling a story of hope, healing, and progress. Jake stood in front of the mural, his hands in his pockets, as he watched a group of children playing nearby. Their laughter echoed through the square, a sound that filled him with a quiet sense of pride. The community had come a long way since the days of division and fear. The scars of the past were still there, but they had become reminders of how far they had come, not weights holding them back. The changes in the community were undeniable. The dialogue between the police and the residents had transformed into a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Officer Ramirez and his colleagues had become regular faces at community events, not as enforcers, but as allies. The civilian oversight board Jake had fought for was now fully operational, ensuring accountability and transparency within the police force. Crime rates had dropped, not because of fear, but because of a renewed sense of responsibility and care for one another. Local schools had also become hubs of change. Teachers incorporated lessons on empathy, social justice, and community building into their curriculums. Students were encouraged to share their stories, to listen to one another, and to dream of a better future. Jake often visited the schools, speaking to the students about his journey and the importance of standing up for what they believed in. He saw himself in their eager faces, and it gave him hope for the future. The economy of the neighborhood had also begun to thrive. Small businesses, once struggling to survive, were now flourishing thanks to the support of the community. A cooperative market had been established where local farmers and artisans could sell their goods. The market had become a gathering place where people came not just to shop, but to connect and celebrate their shared culture and heritage. Jake walked through the market that morning, greeting familiar faces and stopping to chat with vendors. He felt a deep sense of belonging, something he hadn't always felt growing up here. The community had become more than just a place. It was a family, bound together by their shared struggles and triumphs. As he walked, Jake thought about the journey that had brought him here. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, fear, and heartbreak. He thought of Marcus, whose sacrifice had been the turning point in their fight for justice. Marcus's face was painted on the mural, his eyes filled with the same determination and hope that had driven him in life. Jake often found himself talking to Marcus in his mind, seeking guidance and strength. "Marcus," Jake whispered under his breath as he stopped in front of the mural. "We did it. We're building the future you always believed in." But Jake knew that the work was never truly done. Change wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one that required constant effort and vigilance. He had learned that lesson the hard way, through the trials and tribulations of their fight against the vanguard and the forces that sought to divide them. He had learned that true leadership wasn't about being in charge. It was about serving others, about lifting people up and giving them the tools to succeed. Jake's thoughts drifted to the lessons he had learned along the way. He had learned the power of community, of people coming together to fight for a common cause. He had learned the importance of listening, of truly hearing the voices of those who had been silenced or ignored. And he had learned that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope was a powerful force, one that could inspire people to do extraordinary things. As the day went on, Jake found himself at the community center, where a group of young activists had gathered for a workshop. They were planning a new initiative to address environmental issues in the neighborhood, focusing on creating green spaces and promoting sustainability. Jake listened as they shared their ideas, offering advice and encouragement when needed. He saw in them the same passion and determination that had driven him and Marcus all those years ago. One of the young activists, a girl named Maya, approached Jake after the workshop. "Mr. Jake," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "how did you keep going when things got so hard? How did you not give up?" Jake smiled, thinking back to the countless nights he had spent questioning himself, wondering if their efforts would ever make a difference. "There were times when I wanted to give up," he admitted. "Times when it felt like the world was too broken to fix. But then I'd think about the people who were counting on us, the kids like you, who deserve a better future. And I'd remember that every small step forward matters, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time." Maya nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Thank you," she said. "I hope I can make a difference like you have." "You already are," Jake replied, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Never forget that." As the sun began to set, Jake returned to the square where the mural glowed in the warm light of the evening. Families gathered around sharing food and stories, while musicians played soft melodies in the background. It was a scene of peace and harmony, a vision of the future they had fought so hard to create. Jake sat on a bench watching the scene unfold. He thought about the world beyond their neighborhood, a world still filled with injustice and inequality. But he also thought about the ripple effect of their work, how their small community had become a beacon of hope for others. He believed that if they could do it here, it could be done anywhere. In that moment, Jake felt a deep sense of gratitude for Marcus, for the community, and for the journey that had brought him here. He knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he also knew that they were ready to face them together. As the first stars appeared in the sky, Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about the future, not just for himself, but for the generations to come. A future where people lived in harmony, where justice and compassion guided their actions, and where hope was stronger than fear. And in his heart, Jake knew that the best was yet to come.